So right now E3 is going on, and in case you missed it, the big announcement that went off from Microsoft is the Xbox One X, which was previously codenamed as Project Scorpio. But we now know it's going to be Xbox One X. It's releasing later this year, I believe November 2nd or 7th, I don't know, but it's releasing in November, and they are really pushing 4K as the reason to upgrade or get an Xbox One X so that you can take advantage of 4K and things like HDR, which honestly, between the two, I think HDR is way more important than 4K because, you're going to be able to see the difference there, I think, with the HDR. Even if you were on a 1080p display, more than you would be able to see 4K, especially when you consider most console gamers are probably playing on a big 42 or 50-inch plus television from about 10 feet away on their couch, where the resolution factor doesn't really come into play as much. But it seems like, Xbox has kind of got their heads up their ass on this whole aspect, and they are trying to say that the 60 FPS number does not matter, which is really we're really no stranger to that here on the PC with seeing consoles not putting 60 FPS at the forefront, even though PC gamers as a whole just know that 60 FPS is better. We know this. Everyone on PC strives to hit 60 FPS or even higher. I game on a 1440p 144 hertz monitor, and it's not for the lack of having 4K displays. I have a few of them here in the studio, including a 40-inch 4K monitor over here to my left. Not a TV, a monitor that's 60 hertz. But why don't I game on it? Because 60 FPS just isn't enough for me. I want 144 hertz. But consoles, they don't get that choice. They are in the walled garden section of gaming where they have absolutely zero choice apart from choosing Sony or Microsoft. It's like politics. You have to choose Democrat or Republican. It's the two-party system. Sure, we got the Nintendo in the works there, but honestly, they really kind of just drive off exclusives and a lot of that. They don't get all of the titles that come out on every other platform like the PC, Sony, and Microsoft products. So just recently, or today or yesterday, Game Central from metro.co.uk did an interview with Phil Spencer, and I really have to credit them for not backing down on this question where he said, Sorry, let me back up a little bit on this. He said, what also frustrates me is that the only number I do care about is the only one that you and Sony don't obsess over, which is 60 FPS, which I understand is easier to do on the Xbox One X than any other console. Fair question. Something I totally am concerned about as well. I've talked about this in the past where I've said, when they're coming out with these new consoles, the PS4 Pro or the Xbox One X, previously the Scorpio, I would really like to see them make 1080p 60 FPS a standard before even considering 4K. Or if you've got the power under the hood, maybe just make it a toggleable option in the menus. Let gamers choose if they want to play at 4K 30 or 1080p 60, because personally, I would rather have 60 FPS. But Phil Spencer's response really is just, kind of just an absolute joke, as he even laughs at the interviewer saying, that's correct, but ha ha ha, what do you care? Why do you care about 60 FPS? To which Game Central replied, it's the only number that affects gameplay, and yet it's the only one you two never go on about. No one can tell the difference between 4K and 1080p and all of that nonsense, which I disagree with to an extent. I mean, you can definitely tell the difference between 4K and 1080p if you're close enough to the display and depending on how large the actual panel is itself. But what he is saying is absolutely correct in regards to that 60 FPS affects gameplay more than 4K. I think resolution has virtually no impact on resolution once you get above a certain point. Like 1080p is really, it's kind of the perfect resolution for playing games on a gigantic television screen. Yes, 4K is better, no doubt, but I think 60 FPS is far more important for the same reasons that Game Central is mentioning, is that it actually affects gameplay. If you've ever played a first-person shooter, like let's say Call of Duty, for instance, there's a reason that in the multiplayer, they make sure to dial back some of the graphical options so that gamers are always getting a buttery smooth 60 frames per second, and it's because it gives a better gameplay experience, and it makes it better, I think, to shoot in games as well. That's, my opinion. I believe that's pretty much objective, though. Honestly, I mean, if you are out there and you play first-person shooters at 30 frames per second, you've got your head in the clouds, and you don't think 60 FPS is going to make a difference in how good you do in a shooter game because of the frame rate, then I'm sorry, but you've got your head just as far up your ass as Phil Spencer does here in this interview. Phil Spencer then later on went to say that I'm not disagreeing with you, but it's a subjective opinion that it's the only one that matters. And I guess he kind of has a point there. It is sort of subjective on that it's the only number that matters. I'm sure some people out there would care about 4K over 60 FPS, but I think anyone that is in the technical know or has any, sort of understanding of how frame rates work would prefer 60 FPS. And I understand Phil Spencer is saying that most gamers don't care about 60 FPS, and I understand where he's coming from with that, because most console gamers don't really care about much. They have already committed to being inside the walled garden of consoles without having any options whatsoever besides Sony or Microsoft. So why would they give a shit about what the frame rate is, or why would they even understand what the difference of frame rate is? I'm not saying that's all console gamers at all. I'm sure there's a lot of console gamers that know what frames per second is and what the difference between 60 and 30 is, and I'm sure anyone that does greatly prefers 60 FPS. That's just my opinion. That's what I'm thinking. So you guys let me know what you think on that down in the comments below. And he goes on to say that it's the only one that affects gameplay, and Phil Spencer says that visuals do affect gameplay, which Game Central responds, not the resolution though, not in any manner close to the difference a good frame rate makes, which I 110% agree with, which I was just saying previously. The frame rate is going to make a much bigger impact on the gameplay than the resolution, and anyone that has ever played video games knows that gameplay is the most important thing. Visuals and graphics are not more important than gameplay. As a complete and total graphics whore myself, trust me, I like my visuals. I like the eye candy. I like seeing HDR. I like seeing 4K, high frame rate. I like seeing all of the graphical niceties that we can get and take advantage of on the PC. But if I come across a game that doesn't have amazing visuals because maybe it's an indie title or maybe it's just the art style that the developers were going for, I don't give a shit. As long as the gameplay is good and it's optimized well, those are the key tenets of what I look for in a new title being released on the PC, and I believe that's what console gamers should be looking for as well, rather than just taking the truck of horse shit that's being shoveled on them by big corporations like Microsoft and Sony telling you that 60 FPS doesn't matter. But you can bet your goddamn ass if they were to come up with a game that ran at 4K 60 FPS, they wouldn't have shut their fucking mouths about it. You know that I'm right. You know that if they got a game to run at a native 4K 60 FPS, they would not stop talking about the fucking thing. So Phil Spencer is 100% talking right out of his goddamn derriere. He's talking out of his ass because he has a marketing agenda that he's trying to push with 4K. Why? Probably because more people understand what 4K is versus frames per second, so it's easier to market to people. That's it. It's easier to market for them to push 4K because it's a buzzword right now. Everyone's like, oh, 4K, 4K. You go everywhere in Best Buy. 4K TVs, 1080p is being phased out. 4K is the way to go now if you're buying a big screen television. So it doesn't surprise me that they're trying to push the 4K, but the fact that he is just talking out of his ass and saying that the frame rate does not matter as much as the resolution is complete and utter bullshit, and every one of you watching this video that has half a brain knows that I'm telling the truth. So let me know your thoughts, as always, down in the comments below. I'll be curious to see what you guys have to say about this, because this just absolutely infuriated me seeing this. And it's not like I planned to pick up the Xbox One X unless it was 60 FPS. If there were some good exclusives on it that I couldn't get on the PC, but I knew I was going to be able to play it at 60 FPS on a console, I would definitely consider picking it up. Maybe if they came out with like a new Fight Night game, or if they came out with a new Madden game, if that's 4K, 60 FPS native, and it's not using some bullshit checkerboard rendering like we know they're going to use anyway. I mean, they keep talking about 4K, but let's be honest, they're going to be using temporal filtering or checkerboard rendering to accomplish this, which is not true 4K. It's bullshit fake 4K. If you guys want to see this, just go load up a game like Rainbow Six Siege, which has temporal filtering in it, and I can make even a potato graphics card run at 1440p because it's rendering at half resolution and it's complete and utter shit. So yeah, that's what Phil Spencer and the boys over at Microsoft are trying to sell gamers, that 4K is more important than 60 FPS. No, it fucking isn't. Shut the fuck up, Phil Spencer. Take the Xbox One X, turn it sideways, and cram it directly up your asshole. Okay? Catch you guys next time now. Ta-da!